good evening.
Good evening to you.
How are you doing?
We are fine.
Okay, now we are in the fourth session. That is the fifth session of the RPL process. Maybe who can tell us the flow of the RPL process, because we have tackled different learning outcomes. Yes, Juliet?
We have one whereby you create awareness and publicity.
Yeah.
Then number two, after creating awareness, you guide and counsel.
Okay.
Then after that, after guiding and counseling, then you do what is called assessment.
Okay, now you have an idea of what we do. The RPL process, we said it begins with the RPL, that is awareness creation. Then after the awareness creation, the counseling is done. Then after the counseling, we have the submission of the application. And now we are in the stage of assessment and certification. And under the assessment and certification, this is whereby people are undertaken through some tests, then they are certified. I believe when we were introducing RPL, in the understanding of RPL, we went all with this, and we said that a candidate must be assessed for you to certify that particular candidate. Now, under the assessment process, we say after the counselor has already guided that particular student, and then that student has submitted the application, there is something that we call the planning of assessment, which should be done before the real assessment, whereby the assessor and the candidate who has applied for the RPL come together so that they can come to an agreement. Because when planning for the assessment, you must make sure that that particular day that you have planned for that particular assessment, the candidate is available and he or she is comfortable to do that particular exam on that particular day. With me, I have a sample of an assessment plan. Maybe you can have a look. Under the assessment plan, you can share it together. Under the assessment plan, we say you indicate the details of the candidate. So the second content of the candidate, the assessor's name. Yeah, those are the major details that you feed in the assessment plan. You also feed in the unit of competency that particular student is sitting for. You must make sure that you indicate it. You also write the venue whereby that particular assessment will be carried out, and also the task that particular candidate is required to do during the assessment process. You should also indicate the evidences that particular candidate has brought. Remember, we said during the cancellation process, you tell that particular candidate you tell him or you inform him of the different evidences that he needs to have, and we assume that during the assessment plan, when you're doing the assessment plan, that particular candidate has already gathered the different evidences that are required for him or she to sit for the assessment. I don't know whether there is anyone with a question up to there at the assessment plan stage. Anyone with a question? No. Now, after the assessment plan stage, we move on to the assessment process itself. And during the assessment, at this stage, this is whereby we will have the verifier, we have the internal assessor, we have the industry expert, and the candidate himself. The verifier at this point is there so that he can ensure that the assessment process is. I remember we were saying that the assessment process must be valid. It should be authentic. It should also be like the assessment process should also be fair to that particular candidate. Those are the major maybe principles of the assessment process, and therefore the verifier is there to make sure that all those standards are observed, and there is no how do we call it? There is no favorism to any other candidate. The assessment must be done fair to each and every candidate who has come for the assessment process. So at this stage now, the candidate is being assessed. After the student has been assessed, then the feedback will then be given to that particular candidate after the assessors has already marked the validator, that is the verifier will be there to ensure that the marks are okay. Then the feedback will be given to the candidate. And before you give the feedback to the candidate, the candidate must first give you the feedback. After him giving you the feedback, maybe you can ask him some few questions of how the assessment process was. And then maybe you then give your feedback and maybe show the candidate the marks. And if that candidate is not satisfied with the marks, you will then maybe tell him to appeal, maybe for another reassessment. And if you noted during the assessment process there was a skill gap, you will also fill a form of the skill gap. This is whereby now the candidate you will write maybe areas whereby the candidate needs to improve for him or her to be given the certificates. Are you together up to there? And also in the skill gap, you can either use it during the cancellation process. You see, you can identify some skill gaps that the candidate has when you are asking him some questions. But also, during the assessment process, you can also identify some skill gap. And when you are giving him or her the feedback, you're supposed to ensure that you tell him the different areas that he or she has some skill gaps. And at this point, you can advise him or her and attach him to maybe a mentor who can maybe guide him or her for him to improve. Then maybe the certificate will be given later to this particular candidate. I don't know whether we have a question up to there. Anyone with a question up to there? No question.